here is we got valve casings, and this is an old one, 1903 long bell King Cornet. It has a lot of nicks and some gouging here from screwdrivers, pliers, whatever. And so we got to make sure we get these removed. Well, you can't just go at these with a buffing wheel because you just destroy the horn. So what we do is we just come in with jeweler's files, and I'm working on a spot here that had a huge acid burn into the silver. So I'm just filing all the silver down. And on these older horns, there's a lot more silver. So if you try and buff it out, you'll start hitting that brass, and it erodes at a different rate than the silver or nickel plate or whatever is on the surface. So I will take a pattern file, jeweler's file, peddler file, whatever you want to call it, and I'll work around that distortion or that divot or burned spot in the silver until I get to the brass around it. And then I'll file everything in and kind of feather it out. So I've gone at this quite a ways. So now I'm just going at it with some spent emery, and I'm going to feather this out so that when we go back later on and we're doing the buffing, we don't wind up having lots of waves and modeling in the surface. We want it to be really smooth. So while you have the horn apart, take the time to clean these areas up. Sanding out the spots and cleaning them up may seem a lot more aggressive than a buffing wheel, but believe me, a buffing wheel will make a pig's ear out of this in no time at all. So this didn't take but a couple of minutes to get this really bad blemish out of the side of the casing wall. Now don't go getting too deep into the areas with emery or anything like that, because then you're going to have these little, what we call cat whiskers sticking out. We don't want that. So we just want to kind of go around, hit all of the rough areas with some spent emery. If it's a really rough area, use your pattern files and your pillar files and clean those areas up, file them out, get them nice and smooth. Try not to dig too much into the metal, and you just feather it out. And when we get to where we're buffing this, it'll look really, really good, and you won't have any waves or distortion in it, okay? So there you go, simple. Now here's another spot that can be pretty tricky. See, it's got the patent pending mark down on the bottom of the valve casing. But this has also got some galling or gouges from when somebody tried to undo the cap because it was stuck and they didn't have it lined up right. They shouldn't have used a pliers anyway. A rawhide mallet would have knocked it loose, no problem. But they got on it with a pair of pliers, and those water pump pliers kind of got over here, and as they turned it, they raped it right through there, just ripped up the metal. So what we're going to do is we're going to be very careful not to take the letters out, but at the same time, see if we can get all this gouging and such taken care of. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go over it with a file here with a lot of care. And I'm not going to dig into the letters, just going to try and go over the top areas here and see if I can take those marks out. And we'll see how this one goes. I mean, you can only do what you can do. You got so much metal to work with, so you want to go in here and be really, really gentle and patient. But it shouldn't take you a month of blue moons. And again, you do not want to go at something like this with a buffing wheel. You just need a punch in the forehead if you start thinking that. Okay, so come around. And even if you can't get rid of all of it, you can certainly remove quite a bit. If you just take the time to work around those letters, you don't need to get on them and start ripping metal away from them. But if you can get these other areas cleaned up, you can at least provide the illusion that the damage is gone. I mean, you can hide stuff in the radiuses and the surroundings on these surfaces, because they will be reflective and they will pick up and reflect other objects around them. And so we want to, by softening all of the defects in the metal, the damage, we can actually make it appear as if they are completely gone. So we just come in here, go around. Again, don't get carried away and start going after the lettering. We're going to have to do some sanding on this, and we can't, not sand on the lettering, but that will help us feather everything in. we come back over here and we got that really bad galling there. It's just something just really dug in. Well, we know what that was. That was a pair of pliers is what that was. All right, so this is the 1903 Cornet King. This is actually a presentation instrument of some sort, but it does have a some extra engraving other than the typical HN White engraving of the turn of the last century, late 1890s, early 1900s. This one actually has additional engraving on it. It says 209th Overseas Battalion, Swift Current, Canada. And so this has been in the same family for about 120 years. So we've got to do a quick look over on the bell. We've got obviously a very big dent right here, and a few underside dents. And then of course the bell flare has been damaged. It's a bit beat up, but overall for its age, it's not too bad. It needs some cleanup, but we're going to start off with doing the dent work. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to straighten out the bell flare, the rim, and then we'll go after this big dent here. We'll probably use we'll start out with a rod and a ball if that will work, and go from there. We may use the Roth tool and go underneath it in stages to raise that dent. But overall, it's not too bad. And then we'll eventually work our way to working on tapered mandrels and maybe even the dent machine. So time to get started. Okay, so we got bell iron. We're going to focus on fixing that bent rim. We're not going to worry about the creases and everything in it. So we're going to be using what people have known me in the past, we refer to as the Serious Hammer of Doom and the Universal Bell Mandrel, my knee. So we're just going to start off by knocking that rim back into shape, roughly, and pull it down. Yeah, so we got that taken care of there. Okay, that pulls that out. We got this bell iron. That straightens out the rim to an adequate level. Then we'll just use a couple of rolling burnishers just to soften the creases, because this bell does have a lot of fine engraving on it. We don't want to use any kind of fixed burnisher, so we're going to use a rolling burnisher. Push that out. And again, I don't want to do anything that's overly aggressive. We're just roughing this flare out a little bit. We'll get to a finer level of dent work using power discs in the dent machine. Okay. Good enough for this job. All right, this is the Roth tool. This one here is a pretty old one. It's no longer manufactured. There is a different variation on it, which some people love and some people hate. Anyway, this one's very solid, rigid, and fixed. It doesn't have any adjustable bits on it. We're going to use the shortest head. This one is it's basically a spring that goes around this wire. And what we're going to put on it are the N101 Freeze dent balls. So I start off, I'm going to go, okay, I want to figure out what size dent ball I want to use. So I'm just going to do a rough approximate. I want to be undersized, so I'll go to the midsection and I'll say 576. That's okay. Well, obviously this is going to be, the thickness of the wall is about 20 thousandths, give or take. So 576 or 575, take away 40. So 50, 60, so 525. Okay, so let's go with a 525 dent ball. Let's find out what we got here. That's 676, 16, 577, 545, 507, take it up a couple. 524, let's go with that. So we don't want it to be in this area. We want to actually be kind of down in this neck of the woods so that we can push this ball by. But because this is so deep, we don't want to use that size of a ball. We want to go down considerably smaller so that we can start raising this dent and not have the ball bunch up on one side or of the dent ahead of it. It's where it puts a big goose egg in here. We don't want that. So it's held on by, take your round nose pliers, back them off, round them over on itself, and when you pull the wire in, locks in the hole down there. There's a recess in there. See, now that ball is much smaller than the tube because we want to get underneath that dent. All right, so start off going here. We'll grab a magnet. So that's got a earth magnet in it. So that's pretty, tells us the ball is right at that point. So I'm now going to position myself. You do not ram these down. You just gently pull them down. So you can see where that's starting to push there. But because even this ball is too big, we have to go to even smaller size. So we take the wire, back it off, and we'll go quite a bit smaller. We want to get underneath that and get started at raising that dent. So again, okay. And it's slowly coming up, but again, it's giving us trouble, so we have to go even smaller. Open another side. There we go. This is flat, so I'm going to get back underneath here. And that pushes it. By hitting it on the sides, we're able to, once you get things starting to come out, hitting on the sides pushes in, which causes the metal to come out even further. So now we can slowly work our way back up. And yeah, the wire goes all the way through into this spool. So we can clip it off and we can keep going. I don't always clip it off right away because it's just wasteful sometimes. So I will redo it a few times. I'll just unfold the wire. But after a few times, you do not want to keep doing that because it will break off inside and lodge the ball. Okay. Okay. And okay. So come back in. We're just pushing that dent up. You can see how it's got a bulge in the middle now. So we're slowly bringing that up. It's where the ball is without any pressure under it, so we're getting pretty close. So I will come along here. You can hear hammering on the ball there. We don't want to do that too much. Okay. So I'm hammering out all the high spots as we go. And we're slowly getting that dent raised up. You can still see there's some show there, but we'll work our way through it. See, and we're just taking our magnet and So we're right underneath that, but we can probably go past it now. It's right in there. So I just keep working that out. So what are we doing now? Okay, this is just rounding out. It's a burnishing effect on the tube to help round it out and get the high spots down. Because you're always going to have a little bit of raising on the inside of the bow, the radius in there, because the ball is going to push out. There's a lot of pressure put on this, a bit more than is typically used, because this is fairly hard and thick. So, and the depth of the dent in the bow made it particularly difficult to get that dent raised, so it's going to push down on the inside of the bow a little bit too. So we're going to round this out a bit. You don't choke these up too much because you can cause damage to the tube and get it kinked in there. I'm just pushing down the high spots. Okay, now I'm starting to work on the bell stem. We've already gotten the crook dedented. We got those big ugly dents out of there. And so it's relatively where we want it to be. It needs a little bit of freshening up here and there. But now we're working on the stem, and we're going to work our way forward to the bell throat. We don't want it to be tight on the mandrel. So we're using our larger tapered mandrel, and it goes all the way back here, but it is loose. And so we have to kind of straighten a few things out. Bell stem was a bit bent. We're not trying to cram this over. This mandrel does not fit tight. It floats, because what we want to do is work at the high spots. The low spots of the dent will rest on the mandrel. We're just taking those folds and we're knocking those down, whether it's through hammering with a mallet, burnishing, or using asbakis and the hammering blocks. So I'm just gonna kind of go around and knock all the high spots down on the mandrel. Try not to do anything. We don't want to crush the brass. That's not the goal. You're not forcing it to shape. You're just kind of pushing up the low spots. We're taking down the high spots. So we get down into like an area here where we have a kind of a dent that was pretty bad. We've gotten it softened out, but it's still not quite right. And it has a lot of wrinkles in the depth of it. So go over it with asbakis in, because it's a taper wedge and it has a very flat spot. It's only going to push down at the high spots. So we'll walk that around on there, and it helps smooth things out. We'll push on the bottom using the mandrel, what we call a nose picker, and we push those flat spots up and round them out. Okay, and we can go on it and we can just kind of smooth things out. You can also use a ring burnisher or horseshoe burnisher, call it, and use that to kind of burnish and round things out. And I prefer to use this dry, as long as all of your surfaces are clean and there's silver plate on it, just burnishing it. The silver acts kind of like a lubricant, but it is getting burnished away. It's going to be replated in the end anyhow, so it doesn't really matter. But just kind of going over things and rounding it out, finding all the high spots, pushing them down. Low spots will come up as we go. And eventually this will be lightly sanded. But first we have to get all of the unevenness and dents and flat spots and everything pushed out. So far, so good. By using the asbestos, we are hammering on a mandrel in this instance, and we are just taking down all the high spots. Using a canvas hammer in this case. And these they're wedge shaped and they have a flat interior. So they find the high spots and they just press them all down. So we have like some dents here. We can go on this and just press them down. You don't want to overdo it because you can crush the metal. We do gently. All right, well, we're using the Z60 dent machine to smooth out and blend the bell tail, or not the tail, but the stem and the throat. And just kind of blend them together and going gently. We've already burnished and raised all the dents through hammering and burnishing and using blocks, asbestos, and on mandrels. So now we're just smoothing things out, and then we'll approach the bell flare finally and get that cleaned up, and then do an inspection, and we'll fill it with Cerebin and proceed with smoothing things out and getting the bow shaped to fit the body. All the wrinkles and creases come out of it, it runs much more smoothly. And then we just kind of level everything out, and it cleans up nice.
So now we're getting in the inside of the bell, right?
Yeah, well, the inside of the rim. So there's like low spots along here, little dents and things that are along the rim of the bell. So I'm going to go around that now and smooth those down. As far as like putting inside rim dents and things like that, it's because people are lifting the bell too much and they're kind of torquing it against the rim and the rollers, and that will bend the rim and it causes it to sink. You have to let it float and feed it between the rollers. If your rollers are too tight, that'll cause problems too. You just want everything to be fed. There's enough room in there for the sheet metal to go through, and that's it. Sometimes you have to tighten it up, sometimes you gotta learn to back off. But you'll notice I'm not torquing on this, I'm letting it float and I'm just feeding it through.
Just letting it flow so people doesn't have to leave the bell out because
Yeah,
they
don't
will
do
make...
that.
Okay.
You're just feeding it between the rollers, and that'll help keep it'll go its own way. It finds its direction because of just the geometry of the bell will steer it, but you have to help it a little bit and you have to feed it. So I'm not forcing anything or doing anything aggressively, because if you have too much pressure, you're compressing the metal and you're going to stretch the bell. And if you're dealing with something like a Bach 50B, you can easily stretch it and destroy the bell because it'll have a buckle towards the rim and it'll make popping noises, and you'll never be able to get that out of there. But on these smaller bells, these are pretty easy to deal with, really. You just got to be careful. Pay attention to what you're doing. The machine will only do what you tell it to do. If you tell it to screw up the bell rim, it'll screw up the bell rim. Put some mineral spirits on it, you know, and just kind of wash off the majority of the dirt. You don't have to get crazy with it. But okay, I'm going to take the bell and we're going to we're going to clean it up here momentarily. I have to do a little bit of annealing on this. I forgot about that. So I'm going to have to do a light polish on this and sand it some. Then we've got a pot full of cerebin, which I'm going to torch. We're going to get that melted and get that up to 180 degrees. We'll be testing it with a thermometer. And then we'll pour this and then we'll quench it in cold water and let it sit and draw all the heat out of it. Then we can move on with bending and blocking the crook. There you go. Okay, so what we had to do is we had to go in and we had to buff off the silver in this area. I don't know if you can see it in the film, but or in the camera, but the brass is not yellow, it is orange. So it's like 70 or 80% copper, which was common on kings at the turn of the last century. So we had to take the silver off from about here up to here because this area here has to be annealed. This metal is unbelievably thick, meaning the silver. It's really, really thick silver, which means it will run. If I melt this or get this up to annealing temperatures, that silver will melt and it will literally blister and then it'll boil and run. And then we'll have a big mess to clean up. So it's better just to take the silver off in the area where I'm gonna work. And now I can anneal it and then we'll fill it with cerebin. So here we go. And I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but you can see here where the silver blistered just from the heat coming from over here. If I got that red hot over here, this blistering would have liquefied and it would have been a huge mess. So that's why we will sand this eventually. All of this will be lightly sanded on the tube sanding machine. But for the time being, We want to make sure that we're not making a bigger mess here, because we have to fill this with Cerobend, then we're going to rebend this after we block out the unevenness with the Aspakesin. So we'll smooth this all out, and then we'll smooth out the rest of it. We'll rebend the radius in the bow, which we deliberately let open up, because when we fill it with Cero, we're basically casting a mandrel. We're then going to bend this back and make this bell fit on the body of the horn. This plating is blistering from the heat. It starts to lift.
Okay.
So we have to make sure that we didn't want that to be the case everywhere, because then it would be a really big mess.
Okay.
So bits and pieces. We've got a bucket down there for quenching. We're not going to fill this bell all the way up.
Okay.
We're just gonna...
Now we are melting the Cerobend.
Yep. I normally would use a double boiler or a crock pot, but my latest crock pot doesn't accommodate this vessel. This is a stainless steel vessel. Okay, right now it's at 200 degrees, which is too hot. It was a 220 a minute ago. So we're just going to stir a little bit more to get some of that heat out of there. Now you're gonna have to get over here and get it wherever you need to. So I'm gonna. Up. Not used to people being around me when I'm doing this. Okay, as you can see, I spilled a little. Okay, so you don't go running around with this stuff, sloshing about. Put it in there like that. There we go. And then we just let that sit.
Those are the leftovers.
Yeah.
Making more corns.
It's
Roasted.
It's like one of our colleagues said it was the best use for one of these that he's ever seen. For antique tins for making cornbread, individual serving sizes, I guess. Maybe an hour or two more and this will look fantastic. It'll be a beautiful horn.
It's a King being 1903.
Yep.
Cornet.
Long bell. Kind of a rare bird. You don't see these very
Beautiful
often.
engraving.
Oh, yeah.
And the customer is from Canada, right?
Yeah. I believe they're from Saskatchewan.
That's nice. So now you're filing just all the little scratches and everything they have to make it even.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't call these scratches. They're pretty deep. So we got to get them.
More like a dent.
yeah. Between a scratch and a dent, a combination of the two.
Okay.
Yeah. Sanding.
Sanding and sanding and sanding.
Yeah. Well, we've already gone over, because it had lots and lots of ring dents and tool dents from people working on it in the past, and so
pliers too. People were using pliers on that.
Yeah.
That's sad.
So I'm just finding all of the dents and the nicks and deep gouges in this, and I'm filing them out and sanding them, so when this is all finished, it'll look, as close to new as possible. But while you've got it in pieces, this is the time to clean things up. But don't round your stuff over. Make sure you keep everything nice and four square. Don't round off the ferrules or the grease cups or the end rings with the threads and all that.
So now what is that you're doing with that tool?
Oh, it's a hook scraper. I'm just going in here because there's some crud and old solder up in here that was from when it was originally built.
So you're pretty much scraping some of the old solder.
Just scraping out the old solder that's
Making
crusting up
it
in the
even.
corners. So we just pulled it out of the water, cooled it off, and you can see where the brass was, or the silver was removed during the polishing process to get it off, so that when we annealed it, it didn't do anything bad. So I'm just kind of going over it with some red Scotch-Brite to remove any of the fire scale from the annealing, so we can see what's what. You can see the seam in the metal right there. That's the brass seam. It's under the silver plate. This silver plating is very thick. So, now I've got some ridges, a little high spots and things like that on here, so I'm going to use the tube is full of CeraVent.
Yep.
So it's solid. And it's poured into, it's filled up to about here and up to about here.
Oh, okay.
So
all of that is safe to tap.
yep. So this is just going around, finding all the high spots. Now, when we filled this with CeraVent, one of the things that a lot of folks don't do is they do not quench it in water. CeraVent, if you let it air cool, will get hard. It will be really, really, really hard. And if you try to bend a tube with CeraVent in that's been air cooled, it'll snap and it'll destroy the part. You must, without fail, you must cool it. And it has to go into the water, cold water preferably, and leave it in there for half hour, 40 minutes. You don't have to leave it in there that long, but I do just because, well, reasons. Anyway, that is the thing about CeraVent. If you do not do that, it will be too hard to work, and you can destroy the part that you're working on. And even what we're doing here, blocking, it'll be too hard, and the metal won't yield. You need the CeraVent has to yield to the hammering, or it doesn't work. All it does is damage the tube. So that's pretty much one of those things that is an absolute must. Not a kind of sorta. You must cool the CeraVent and let it soak, because it does not give up its heat rapidly. It'll reheat if you take it out too soon, because the core is still hot. It is not like a lot of other metals. It behaves very strangely, and it has a weird expansion-contraction ratio with the metal that the tube is made out of itself. And so things can shrink, and then the CeraVent can re-expand and rupture the tube. So you don't want to play games with this stuff. Get it in the cold water and leave it in the cold water. Go have a lunch or something. I'm just bending the radius back, because you can see the bell is kind of a Dizzy Gillespie thing. It's going up. And so we want to bend this radius back in. And while this is bending, because it's filled with CeraVent, the CeraVent stays stationary. The sheet metal gets pulled over it, and it will tauten up. And that's why we anneal this, because we're going to be bending this. So we want to make sure that it's soft enough. But now we're going to bend this. That's going to pull some of this distortion out, and we're going to restore this to where it's a proper 180-degree bend. So here we go. Here we go. We pulled that out.
Nice.
So now I'll put a little bit more bend in it, and then I'll pull this side out a little bit, because it's a little too boxy on that side. Okay, then we'll come over here and pull that out so we get a proper D-bend. There we go. And then we're in the midsection there. And then we come up here, we're in the midsection there. So we've got a proper 180 degree. We're not being fooled by the taper. So there we go. And so now you can feel the outside here. It's very smooth. You know, that where that big old crunched in part was.
There is nothing.
There's nothing there to feel. It's nice and smooth.
Yeah.
So we could go over this one more time with the blocks just to kind of smooth out anything that might have come through in the inside, like in the way of orange peel in the texture. So what do I use for bending? Well, I use Cerobend, which is what we put in this bell here, which is very handy and convenient. It's expensive, but it melts at 158 degrees or thereabouts. Whereas when we work lead, we're working it up around 500 degrees. It's also hazardous to work with, but I mean, if it's not boiling, it's pretty safe stuff. It's, you know, people get really freaked out about lead or even Cero because they think that all of these poisons are going to get in the air. We're not getting it that hot, but when I use lead, it's usually for things that are really, really critical as far as the bending process, and I need to have the filler metal to be as soft as I possibly can have it. Lead is very stable. It stays soft. You can work with it quite a ways, and it will stand up. It is hazardous to handle because you're dealing with high heat, and it's hard to clean up, whereas Cero is very easy to clean up and a much lower temperature, but it is a metal that hardens and it can cause problems. And if you're working on a piece that you've just spent, you know, a day and a half making, to have it crack or something go sideways because the Cero isn't working right, then it could be a nightmare. But also for when you're dealing with parts that are very fragile and you need to have stability in your filler metal where it's not expanding or contracting at weird times and rupturing the tube or exposing areas of dezinkification, which is what Cero will do. That is where you run into problems. So they both have their place. You just have to make your judgment calls based on the job itself, the materials, and what you're trying to accomplish. Warming things up, heating up the Cero, and then we pour it out. And get the brush. What is that brush that you have there, Ruben, that I gave to you? So we'll keep that handy. Remembering that this melts, we're only going to bring it up to 180 or wherever that is comfortably melting it out. We'll pour it out, and then we'll just run the brush through it while it's still hot, and that'll get the rest of the Cero out of there. Any of that flashing, it might still be in there. You can feel that there's, when you move it around, it starts to slosh a little bit with big chunks in there. We have to get all that melted down. It's pretty much up to temperature, so we'll just heat it up and pour it out. Okay, so we just warm everything up. Hot. We'll take our brush and we'll just Push this down in there. And pull the small one through. Catching me the residual that's in there, and that's that.
That was it? It doesn't need more brush?
Probably not. But we do have a little up in the top here, so I'm gonna warm this up. And I can get up in here and kind of swab it out a little bit. Want to be careful not to bang it on anything because we just spent all that time taking all the dents out of it. It'd be a shame to put more dents in it. So, okay, just clean that off. Paper towel, just put that up in there and swab out anything that might be in the throat of the bell. Just wipe it out. Not much going to hang out inside of there, especially when it's going to be going through a polishing process, which is going to make that metal nice and hot. Anyway, there we go. This bell is ready for a little extra love, but not too much. Some polishing. We'll take this ferrule off, do a little bit of work on the tail still, because it does have some unusual unevenness, but I'll make a mandrel that will fit this nice and snug, and then we'll burnish that out, get it nice and straight, polish it, and this will be ready to be mounted to the valve section. So there you go. That's a slit. Well, it's a little bit wider than a slit. Slit would be narrower than that, but I didn't want to change out the wheel. So.
Okay, so what happened there? So you
just sliced through the ferrule with a sling saw, and cut through it lengthwise just enough, and then stuck a screwdriver. After I heat it up, put a screwdriver blade in there, give it a twist, and it pops, and then it opens up and it comes off. Okay, so now we've already done some repairs. I saved everybody the grief of watching this because this was really, really blown out and I was fumbling all over the place. So now we're going to go over here. We're going to address this other port here that has a number of small holes in it. We'll be building this up with quite a bit of copper because these valves were just mangled, this one in particular. So I'm just going through and I'm filling in all the holes, and we're using a silver bearing solder, not silver solder in this case, just silver bearing solder. It's mostly tin and antimony and some silver and stuff like that, but no lead because that causes problems for the plating. So we're just going to go in here now and we're going to address, there's little holes in here. There's a couple of them, one there, one there. And because those are kind of corroded like everything else here, I'm just going to kind of dig in here a little bit with a file and see if I can kind of get a little more clean metal in there. The flux will help with some of that, but for the most part, we're just going to get in here and we're going to see if we can dig these out a little bit so that the flux and the solder can actually do their thing. Okay, fortunately, this one's not just full of, you know, huge holes like the other one, but we'll see what we can do here. So we're just going to preheat. Run torch through there. We've already got an iron here. And we're just going to come in. A little more heat in there. And a little bit of flux. Okay. It's pretty hot in there. So we're just going to come in. We got a bead of solder on the iron, and then we'll just come in here. Lay that down in there. Go back over here, give it a little more heat. Go back in. Get that solder flowing in there nice and uniformly. Get a good puddle in there. Not always that easy to do, but so we'll come back in, reheat a little bit more. That's going to fill way back in there, and then what we'll use is like we'll go in here with a work down Cratex wheel on a Dremel once we're satisfied that that's filled in right. Put a little bit more flux in there. Now these valves are, you know, this isn't the way we're going to send them out. They're going to get cleaned up quite a bit. And then they'll be coppered over, and there'll be a whole lot of prep work, and eventually they'll be nickel plated and honed and all that kind of stuff. So. We cut through to the substrate there a little bit, not much. And we'll come in and we'll put a little bubble. Okay. And so now that's nice and clean. And then I'll just take a little emery, because we got a little tiny burr on the inside of that edge.
Okay.
So when we did all that plating on everything, we wind up building up a lot of metal on the valve itself, the copper here. And so what happens is the tops get a lot of flashing, the shoulder up here just below the tower, and the same with the bottom. These get built up quite a bit, and if you don't cut this stuff back, it can be really unsightly after it's nickel plated, because once the nickel's on, you can't go back. And so what I'm doing is just cutting this back. Now I've already faced off the bottom here, because if you don't, especially when it's a valve like this that's had a tremendous amount of copper added to it, almost 10 thousandths, this will protrude through the bottom of the casing when the valve is depressed, and it can hit the bottom cap, and that's bad. So we trim that all back until you can see the base metal or the substrate showing through here. It's just a little bit of Monel. And then what we're doing is we're going to clean up the top here, because we mask off the tower, but this shoulder here does get buildup on it, and it creates a very rough surface in here, and you can get flashing that overflows. So I have to cut all of that away. So I'll use my parting tool with a wide insert in it, offset so that the inside edge of the cutter is going to touch at the depth in the corner there, and take all of that flashing and everything away and clean this all up. So here we go.
Very, very gentle.
Strip of 220. Walk that into the corner, and you just go up the towel very carefully. Don't overdo it. And it just cleans off all of the crud that was on there. And so now we have
Very smooth.
it's all nice and four square.
Shiny and smooth.
And then usually what I'll do with these is I'll bring them out a little tiny bit and use the safety file here and knock off that corner. do that just a little bit because we don't want to have a sharp edge there. That can cause some problems. It can also cut your hand when you're handling it. So I will now go around and I'll scrape the insides of each of the ports, the mouth of each port, to make sure that it has a little bevel on it, meaning around the outside edge here. We'll use a scraper and we'll cut that back and put a bevel on it. And that will build in to a degree with nickel, but we don't want to actually restrict each port because that can cause problems too. Very insignificant, but you know, better safe than sorry. So now I'm just going to take these and go around the edges and scrape those out. And that's pretty much it. It's ready for nickel plating. Next, we'll clean these and get them masked and prepared so that the plater can do his business tomorrow. There you go.